128 years ago today, gold was discovered in the Yukon territories, initiating the Great Alaskan Gold Rush. 79 years ago today, people were celebrating the end of World War II. 55 years ago today, 1,000 mud-soaked teenagers were listening to the latest rock and roll music at the Woodstock Festival in upstate New York. At least that's what they told their parents they were doing. And 47 years ago today, God's greatest gift to screaming and hysterical teenagers was taken away. Why? Because 47 years ago, Elvis left the building. The king was dead at Graceland. Now, some of us, of course, who are true believers in Elvis, like my brother Frank, were not used to accepting that he died. So today, if my brother were living, he would prefer to say 47 years ago today, Elvis left public life. Thanks to my cousin Geraldine, who owned every 78 long-playing album recorded by Elvis, my 17-year-old brother joined with those screaming and hysterical teenagers, becoming a die-hard fan of the King. So serious a fan, Frank ate Elvis's favorites, fried peanut butter and banana sandwiches. I've had that. For dessert, Elvis's favorite, two chocolate cake donuts with double chocolate frosting on top. A healthy meal for any growing teenage boy. Easy to make, a reward for watching his younger brother, 10-year-old me. Sworn to secrecy, of course, from Mom. We were latchkey kids, so secrets from Mom, impossible. Frank even bought a pair of those Elvis Presley sunglasses. You might remember those, the ones that had the fake sideburns glued on the side, and for an extra $1, fake ducktails to go with them. Frank's ducktails were the real thing. No fakes for him. And like so many other devoted fans, he had hoped to, but could never make the pilgrimage to the King's Castle, the mountaintop of rock and roll, Graceland Mansion. But that didn't stop Frank. He couldn't afford to make the trip, so he did the next best thing, a Walkman. Remember them? Ordered straight from the King himself, a pre-recorded cassette tape describing all there was to see at Graceland. Put on your headphones, pop in your rented cassette, push a button, and voila, the docent would start talking, a soft Elvis ballad heard in the background, and that's how my brother toured Graceland Mansion. Room to room, listening on his Walkman, the precursor and the great electronic grandfather to the Boss headphones and wireless iPad. Even when Frank was making fried peanut butter and banana sandwiches for us, he had memorized every word on that tour. To the left, you will see the room that has shag green carpeting on the ceiling. Elvis decorated the jungle room by himself. No explanation given. To the right, you will see a television with a gunshot hole in the middle of the TV tube. Elvis got very angry in the middle of a football game, and Elvis shot the television. Soon it will be preserved for all of history in the Smithsonian. Frank pretending to be the narrator on his Walkman. Prepare yourselves, more excitement ahead. You're now entering the way into the kitchen. It was a 1970 kitchen full of avocado green and brown appliances and Formica countertops. Mary Jenkins Langston was the cook at Graceland, and Elvis loved her cooking, especially her fried chicken. In fact, my brother, in his usually affirming voice, pointed out in 1975, Elvis ate Mary Jenkins Langston's fried chicken 35 nights in a row. That was my reaction, too. So Frank, boldly sitting down for supper one evening, his Walkman ears on securely. My mother, in her most loving way, pow! Right off the top of his head, the earphones fell into his lap, his ducktails all ajar. Dinner time is for family, she said. Now, who in the heck is this Elvis guy anyway? My mom asked. My brother, now on guard, explained, Elvis would be having fried chicken right now, Ma, as he explained. And that's how he got his nickname, Old Fat Elvis. Mom was not amused, and my brother began to duck, anticipating another love, you guessed it. Instead, an admonishment. Never call anyone fat, she said. Now pass the arroz con pollo, and no dessert for you, Frank. My mother was no one to fool with. I would dare say that most of us have all grown up hearing from someone in some fashion or another, you are what you eat. And basically, as I was growing up, I understood what that meant was this. If you eat healthy foods in a healthy way, chances are you will be healthy. And if you eat fattening fried chicken with fries, followed by a fried peanut butter and pickled chips with a double chocolate donut for dessert, well, chances are you will end up way overweight and very unhealthy. You are what you eat. I'm convinced as a deacon that's not just true of our bodies. It's true for our minds and our souls as well. Just recently, I bumped into a parishioner. We were out somewhere having dinner, who took me aside and he said, Deacon, I'm deeply concerned about the direction our country is taking. I'm concerned about the kind of country we're going to leave to our grandchildren. So we chatted about that for a few minutes. Then he said, I've come to one conclusion. He said, I can no longer watch cable television. Why is that? I said. I realized the other day, if all I do is watch and listen to angry people saying angry things to each other, then I'm going to end up being very angry too. Then he said, and I'm not kidding, you are what you eat. You are what you eat. What are we putting into our souls? What is the steady spiritual diet in which your heart and mind and soul are nourished? Is it good for us? Or are you becoming what you eat in a negative way? For instance, a child who is force-fed a constant diet of negativity and shame or is abusively ignored by their parents will very likely become abusers themselves and will be very likely become a very negative and shame-filled person. Or how about the child who constantly hears they never have to take responsibility for their actions or are never corrected for their negative behaviors, will very likely become irresponsible. You are what you eat. Christian teenagers, for example, you teens gathered here tonight have a wonderful opportunity to help your friends. Meaning what? Think about it. Some of your friends who are so gorged on the message that their value is defined by the kind of body that you have or the kind of money that they can spend. And if they feed themselves that kind of foolishness constantly, they become that foolishness. The teenager who is told they never have to turn off their cell phones, even at the dinner table, can sit at a family gathering completely ignoring the human interaction going on around them will very likely be incapable of a healthy human relation. It's Christian teenagers who realize their lives can be the example to another teenager. Jesus was a teenager too, and look how he turned out for his friends. You are what you eat. College students who are force-fed the message by their peers that hooking up and getting drunk are the ways to popularity, ends up hooking up and getting drunk, waking up one day wondering why life feels so empty. Married persons who are sustained by messengers who tell them their careers are more important than their families. that you can cheat on your spouse without getting caught. Well, you become the very lies that you listen to. Of course, these are my opinions, but my 12 years as a prison Catholic chaplain, I've seen it all and I've heard it all, from young and old adults, and especially teens coming out of juvie into adult prisons reinforce my opinions, and how quickly a young person can fail at life. You are what you eat. In today's first reading in the book of Proverbs, God's divine wisdom encourages us to forsake foolishness. We're told in our first reading, stop feeding your hearts and your minds and your souls with the foolishness and lies that promise everything and fulfill nothing. We are encouraged in our first reading to feast on God's wisdom. Why? Because if you fill your hearts and minds and souls with God's wisdom, you become what you eat. And in today's second reading, St. Paul tells us once again to turn our backs on the foolishness that surrounds us. St. Paul gets down to it. He says, don't get drunk on wine, in which lies debauchery and leads to excessive indulgences and sensual pleasures. Turn your back on the foolishness of lying and lusting after things which have no value for who you are in this life. A steady diet of all that kind of stuff kills your spirit. Rather, St. Paul says, nourishes your soul with the knowledge of Christ and the will of God, and you will live. For yourself, for your friends, for your family, you are what you eat. That's why it's so important for us to hear Jesus in today's gospel, where Jesus gives us a life-changing and a life-giving invitation. Jesus says in John's gospel, I am the bread of life, and if you eat this bread, you remain in me, and get this part, you remain in me, and you will have my life in you forever. You will have Jesus' life in you forever. Jesus says, I am the living bread, and this bread, which is the bread of the Eucharist at Mass, is Christ. It's Him. It's Him that is in you when you come to receive Him, praising Him, assenting your great amen when you come to Holy Communion. The Eucharist that we share Sunday after Sunday, day after day, is Jesus, His body, blood, soul, and divinity, the bread of life, who gives Himself to you and to me so freely here. And you become what you eat. You become Christ-like so you can live like Him. Why? Because there are so many people in our lives, Catholic friends, be they teens, young or old, who are suffering and trapped by their own doing. Why? Because they've forgotten what it means to give up on the bread of life, Jesus. If you eat the bread of life, you can be the bread of life to help them and for yourself. Think about it this way. It's Christ who you take with you when you leave Mass. It's the bread of life, Jesus, who works through you for the week ahead of you. You're the one who feeds your best friends or that family member who, without you, has no idea of what it means to be fed or grow closer to Jesus Christ. You can be a peacemaker among violent friends. You can be a light among teenagers trapped by false and unrealistic world, or a joy bringer to an angry world, or a love giver to them in a selfish world. To speak the truth to a friend who needs to hear it from Jesus' heart through your voice. This is the hope we can all give. Why? Because you live and breathe and are nourished by the bread of life in your own souls. You are what you eat. I invite you this week to pay attention to what you are eating, not just the stuff with which you nourish your body, but the stuff with which you are stuffing your soul with. Are you nourishing your soul with prayer and the truths of Jesus Christ? At this Mass, at this celebration, you can find the strength that you need, the joy to take you, the hope and comfort you that you earn to have as you get serious about the love you have for Jesus. Yes, there is one and only one king, and the king who has left the building is looking for you.